All right, good evening. We are reconvening tonight's meeting of the City of Tacoma Park City Council. We had met earlier today at 6:30 for the purpose of a closed session. The topic was NDC at the Tacoma Junction project, and the meeting was closed pursuant to Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions, Article 3305B 7 and 8, which permit a public body to meet in closed session to consult with counsel to receive legal advice and discuss pending or potential litigation with staff, consultants, or other individuals. And so we are now reconvening for our regularly scheduled meeting. So just want to quickly go over changes to the agenda. I do know that, I'm just trying to quickly correct. Okay. I just want to make note that we were expecting to have a presentation on the Montgomery County Development Review process. However, the Montgomery County staff are unable to participate today, and we are working to reschedule that presentation. Additionally, just want to go quickly through the scheduling agenda updates. So I have lots of meeting minutes. And I don't have my rolling agenda. Hold on one second. Oops, oh. Oh, oh. All right, I will look it up. Yes. Oh, the rolling agenda?
Yeah, my apologies.
No worries. I'll look it up.
In last week's, if that's what you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
My apologies. You might want to look at last week's, yeah.
Yep. Okay. No worries. Let's see. Did we not post it?
No, it's not posted.
No worries. Okay. We'll get it together. So, in terms of the rolling agenda,
Mayor, I'll email you something.
Mayor, I just sent you to the top of your email.
perfect. Thank you.
Friday.
Friday's meeting. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. And just gonna wait. Perfect. All right, so the rolling agenda. All right, so as was mentioned, tonight we will have a proclamation for the record, a proclamation recognizing Heshma Brothers operating a business in Tacoma Park for 50 years. So we're excited to have them here today. We will also have adoption of minutes from March the 8th, March the 15th, April the 12th, and April the 24th. And then we will have 2 work sessions. The first, discussion of reprogramming direct cash assistance ARPA funds after the program ends. And then we will also have the quarterly financial report and for the first quarter. Just as a note for members of council, we are now applying time limits to discussions. So the discussion for reprogramming direct cash assistance ARPA funds after program ends, we're anticipating about a 45-minute discussion. And then the quarterly financial report first quarter, we're anticipating a 30-minute discussion. In terms of the rolling agenda, on Wednesday, November the 8th, we'll have our regular meeting scheduled at 7:30. We will have 3 work sessions. The first is a discussion of legislative priorities. The second is a discussion of facilities regulations. And the third is the quarterly library project update. Just as a reminder, on Friday, November the 10th, city offices and facilities are closed for Veterans Day holiday. And Saturday, November the 11th is Veterans Day. On Monday, November the 13th, at 7:30, we will have a council meeting presentations, the annual comprehensive financial report and audit, the police pension plan actuary evaluation, as well as the final report on the long-term financial forecast. On Thursday, November the 16th through Saturday, September the 18th. Just as a reminder, many of us will be attending the National League of Cities Summit in Atlanta, and we'll be traveling. And then on Monday, November the 20th, the council will meet at, did I just read that? I think that's a Monday. I'm gonna triple check. I think it is supposed to be a Monday, 7:30. City Council, there will be a presentation on the city manager's FY25 financial forecast, fixed expenditures and projected revenues, and then we'll have 2 work sessions, one with the city manager search update and the second with the City Council FY25 budget priorities. And that will take us into Thanksgiving, and that is why we have that second Monday meeting, I should say. All right, and so with that scheduling update, we're going to move into, thank you so much, Councilman DeBala. We're going to move into our proclamation, recognizing the Heshma brothers for operating a business in Tacoma Park for 50 years. Okay. All right. So I will read the proclamation now. Proclamation recognizing the Heshme brothers for operating a business in Tacoma Park for 50 years. Whereas brothers Faoud and Nahed Heshme moved to Tacoma Park in 1973 from Ramallah, Palestine, with few possessions, but with an entrepreneurial spirit. And whereas the Heshme brothers' first business in Tacoma Park was the Electric Maid, which was in the location formerly occupied by Mark's Kitchen. And whereas the brothers' next business was an American bakery located next door to the Electric Maid that they operated for 2 years before converting it to a Middle Eastern bakery, which was the first bakery in the DC area to sell fresh homemade pita bread. And whereas in 1980, the Heshme brothers transformed the bakery into the Middle East market with specialty grocery items. And whereas in 2001, the Heshme brothers further transformed the market into a family-style restaurant called Middle East Cuisine for the Tacoma Park community to enjoy. And whereas in 2008, the Heshme brothers and sons expanded into the space behind the Middle East Cuisine restaurant and opened a casual restaurant and bar called Olive Lounge. And whereas the Middle East Cuisine and Olive Lounge serve delicious homemade food from the Heshme's native country, prepared using their own unique blend of spices, marinades, and family recipes. And whereas the Heshme brothers and family have been an important part of the Tacoma Park community for 50 years, and their restaurants are considered Tacoma Park institutions. And now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, hereby congratulate Faoud and Nahed Heshme and their family on operating businesses in Tacoma Park for 50 years and thank them for their service to the Tacoma Park community. Thank you so much.
I'd like to say that my wife is Philistine. She thinks that your falafel is good, and also that the kanafi is up to snuff, which is important because of the continuity associated with why those things are important. So I just wanted to make sure I said that to you.
Thank you. So I want to also say thank you so much. People don't know, sometimes when we have very long meetings and we get to start early because we have so long meetings, we have the pleasure of ordering food from some of our local restaurants to eat. And it's awesome that tonight we also were able to enjoy Olive Lounge. So thank you for providing us with sustenance on many nights when we're anticipating having long council meetings. But also just want to thank you all. You hosted my friends and family and members of the community when I was elected as mayor, and it was hard to find a spot. And so the fact that you all were so willing to take us in last minute and give us such a great environment, I just want to thank you because it is a true testament to just how you run your business. Just welcoming to all, even if we come frantically last minute because we did not know where or if we were going to win. So thank you all so much for your hospitality. And so with that, I am going to photo op. Perfect.
You guys want to make somebody feel welcome on the count of three? You can say Mabruk.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Mabruk.
1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
I've also watched you guys are like always taking your taking deliveries for papers.
Thanks. Yeah. I've only been coming 31 years. Yeah.
We appreciate you so much too.
Houston Matters.
20 years.
So,
Mainstay for
but, you know, that's my theory, my opposite theory about the universe is that it's still 1968.
What is your wife's background?
My wife is Palestinian.
She is.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Her family ran twice.
I sent you a thing that I just was listening to this morning. My friend about Palestinian American right now.
I learned it as a little bit.
Do you have interest? Hi, Tara. I live in Palestinian. I didn't say it. I was 17 years old for summer. That was my first introduction.
All right. That was a pleasure. Okay, and so now we are going to move on to public comments. We don't have any voting items this evening, so we are opening the floor for general public comments.
Good evening, Mayor Searcy and City Council members. I'm here to just chat with you just for a moment about our favorite subject, the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment. As you know, that planning document with its proposals for massive buildings along Maple Avenue and on the campus of the Adventist Hospital has stirred deep concerns in the community. And the City Council has engaged with those concerns and recognized them and reflected them in the resolution that was passed, Resolution 33, to the Planning Board, urging them to address the concerns. And Mayor Searcy, I heard your testimony. I was sitting on the dais with you when you gave it before the Planning Board, and you were very clear. You said, for example, however, the plan needs to be revised to better reflect the city's values, as well as to ensure that the plan takes the necessary steps to protect the most vulnerable among us. One of the key issues that has been surfaced is the issue of potential displacement of existing residents on Maple Avenue if the economic incentives from the zoning were to lead property owners to tear down existing buildings, build new ones. Where would the people go? And the new buildings some of the buildings are protected are publicly owned by agencies that are maintaining them for affordable housing, but only a few of them, only about half of them. Anyway, that issue was squarely raised by the city. If you have watched the first work session that the planning board held a couple of weeks ago, you will have recognized that the planning board staff and the planning board are under the impression that you do not have serious concerns about this plan. In particular, every time they addressed an issue, they would show the portion of the city council's resolution, and then they would say, no changes are needed, we've already done that. And with one exception, the planning board itself basically said, well, we understand you've already done all this, so just put some language in. In fact, the chairman of the board several times says, we're just checking the boxes here. But it's clear that they want the city's support. So I guess what I need to say to you is that they're going to come back to you at the beginning of December with a new plan, which they expect to give you for an up or down vote. They do not expect to listen to your comments or to make any changes. And I don't think they're going to address your concerns. For example, they said nothing at all about displacement of residents in their planning session, and they won't. So I urge you, if that happens, and it's unfortunate, but if it happens, have the courage to say no to the plan, because it won't go away. It'll go back to them, and I'm confident, and they'll try to revise it and address your concerns. But we need you to protect the community. You've stood up for these concerns. They may be resolvable, but if they're not, I urge you to have the courage to say, no, you didn't address our concerns. Thank you.
Sir, would you mind stating your name and
Oh,
where
of
you
course,
live?
I'm sorry. My name is Bob Dreher, and I'm a resident of Ward 3.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other general public comments? And just as a reminder, folks can please state your name and your ward if you know it.
Good evening, Sue Miller, Ward 3. 3 brief items. Number 1, I want to personally thank you for the proclamation for the Hishma family and thank the Hishmas for their amazing food and friendly service and devotion to the community over the 25 years I've lived here. I'm a loyal patron. Number 2, city manager search. Residents are concerned that the public has had no part in this process so far. Now we've heard this idea being floated that the public will only be involved if finalists choose to allow it. I sent you links a long time ago on other cities that have found plenty of candidates who are willing to be public finalists. Please reassure residents that they're not going to be completely cut out of this process. The trend to greater secrecy is disturbing. Number 3, the minor master plan. This is a technical point. Neither the county nor the city has put the county work session dates and topics posted anywhere that is easily findable. I know they were in a PowerPoint, but please post the dates, topics, and links to recorded sessions as they happen on the city's minor master plan page, and please ask the county to do the same thing. This must be a transparent and public process. Meanwhile, it's unclear whether the planning board staff is presenting the considerable concerns of the community to the board, and it's unclear whether the board is making the necessary changes to comply with the city council's strong resolution. I'm also concerned that it looks like 2 of the 4 city work sessions planned by the city council stated in your resolution, the ones on the schools and now the development process, have been canceled or postponed to a time when the process will be over. Most urgently, we need a session on how the city would protect residents from displacement if the MMPA passes in anything like its current form. Already, there is confusing misinformation going out on listservs saying that, for instance, rent-stabilized housing protects people from displacement, which is simply not true. There's confusion over the rent-stabilized housing, which is not protected, versus the subsidized affordable housing owned by nonprofits. Our city staff told you in August, only 44% of the units are protected by nonprofit ownership. Another 40% of the units are rent stabilized, which makes them vulnerable to redevelopment and resulting displacement. In order to reassure residents, we need to hear the county and city's plans for protecting these residents. Of course, one way to protect them is to maintain the zoning for the current heights and density on Maple. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
My dress mask. Good evening, Paul Huebner, Ward 3. Hope you all had a good rest last week while you were off. I also hope you watched closely the County Planning Board meeting last Thursday. Many of us were dismayed by the way the Planning Board staff neither discussed nor considered the very large majority of public comments that opposed the supposed plan as currently drafted. Their staff also said there would be no more Planning Board outreach. They said any further outreach would be done by the city, which would be having community meetings. This council stated in the resolution 2316 that the City Council continues to request that the Montgomery County Planning Board ensures continuing community engagement throughout the planning review process, end quote. I would like to request the dates, the times, and places for the community outreach that the city will have, as you have promised during prior council meetings. There's also seemed some confusion between city and county planning boards. The planning board meeting had scheduled an overview of Tacoma Park City Council resolution as one of the 4 points of the 19th meeting. If such discussion was held, it was cursory at best, just as was the review of the massive number of public comments that opposed the current plan. Your resolution resolved that this council, quote, requires that the Montgomery County Planning Board holds work sessions that critically examines a multitude of topics which are yet to be addressed. The topics of the hospital development requirements with their surrounding single-family homes and access to open space and continuing accessibility, the requirements for promoting diversity of housing as a requirement, the demands for public space, and most of all, the protection of existing housing affordability, diversity, and comparisons to comparable jurisdictions. The mechanisms to prevent displacement of current renters on Maple Avenue must be forthcoming, because this council resolved that you want the planning board to include language in the MMP, quote, that explicitly explains how the plan's recommendations address the community priorities and provides documentation and background information on the climate assessment, environment, on racial equity, resident engagement, including outreach to residents along Maple Avenue, and a list of others that you required to be submitted to our council and staff for your review before submitted to the county council. I want to commend you for your diligence, your hard work, and your forthright demands to our county planning board. Now I request that our HCD staff be required to present their report and analysis after each and every planning board meeting with recommendations and background on their outreach to the community. Thank you all for all you are doing and for doing the right thing.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Do we have any virtual public comments this evening? Oh, there you go.
We do have, Arthur David Olson has a small PowerPoint. And
Okay.
he has 5 minutes,
Okay.
up to 5 minutes.
No problem.
What do I need to do to advance slides? Got it. Fantastic. Arthur David Olson, Ward 4, Herbie Hancock Avenue. First, a matter of full disclosure. I do not own a car. I do not own a bike. I rely on buses and shoes to get around. So that's going to color this. Here we go. Several weeks ago, a city staffer reported to you that the Ride On Reimagine study is looking at the bus networks across the county, and there are some tweaks proposed to some of the routes in Tacoma Park to try and provide more service, more frequent service, more consistent service, and reduce some of the redundancy on some of the routes. My sense is that Ride On Reimagine is not tweaks, and I've prepared some side-by-side before and after slides to hopefully convey to you the basis for my notion that it's not tweaks. Most distressing is the plan to reroute Route 17. On the left, you can see that it currently goes along Maple Avenue and Flower Avenue, and it will no longer serve Maple and Flower if Ride On Reimagine is implemented. These are, of course, the areas of the city with the highest density populations. And with the county's plans for upzoning, those areas are likely to become even more high density. The plan is to have Route 17 go from Silver Spring directly out East-West Highway and then up New Hampshire Avenue to the Tacoma Langley Transit Center. East-West Highway and New Hampshire Avenue are already streets that have every 12-minute service being provided by Metrobus. The plan is to completely move Route 13 out of the city of Tacoma Park, Maryland. Rather than running from Silver Spring to the Tacoma Metro, it would run from Silver Spring to the Crossroads Transit Center. That's going to reduce but not eliminate service on Flower Avenue and on Carroll Avenue. The plan is to completely move Route 14 out of the city of Tacoma Park, Maryland. Again, it would go from Silver Spring to the Tacoma Langley Transit Center rather than the Tacoma Metro. And that's going to reduce but not eliminate service on Piney Branch Road. Route 15 would be completely eliminated. Right now, Route 15 is the fastest way for folks to get from the Crossroads Transit Center to the Silver Spring Metro Station and back. It's true that if the Purple Line ever starts running, folks will be able to use the Purple Line to get from point A to point B. The challenge is that the Purple Line is a public-private partnership, and that means that the fares on the Purple Line are going to be higher than they are for Metro Rail. The fares on Metro Rail, of course, higher than they are on Metrobus, and the fares on the Metrobus are higher, double what they are on Ride-On. So the Purple Line is not going to be a good option for commuting for low-income commuters. The only glimmer of hope in Ride-On Reimagined is the idea of establishing bus rapid transit, Route 550, which would run up New Hampshire Avenue. There are several problems here. One thing that's true is that there is as yet no funding for bus rapid transit infrastructure. And when you don't have bus rapid transit infrastructure, such as dedicated bus lanes, bus rapid transit is simply express buses. And there are already express buses running up New Hampshire Avenue. And another problem is that the proposed bus rapid transit route would run in both Maryland and the District of Columbia. That means that it would have to be a Metrobus route, and that means that the county cannot control it and cannot control the establishment of it. So the bottom line, at least as far as I can determine, is there are lots and lots of cuts being proposed by Ride-On Reimagined, and one iffy improvement being proposed by Ride-On Reimagined. What I hope is that the City Council will weigh in with county folks and let them know that as far as Tacoma Park is concerned, Ride-On Reimagined is, dare I say it, unimaginable. Thank you. Oh, the obligatory contact information. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other general public comments?
We do have one online, Mary Jane Machui.
Okay, great.
I'm trying to figure out how to unmute. Hi. Let me see. It's on my face. Sorry, I'm trying to. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well, so forgive me if I start coughing. I thank you, Arthur David, for looking out for the little people, of which I'm one. I sometimes rely on the Ride-On bus, and I'm grateful that it's still free for seniors, but I don't know when that will end. But thank you. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm Ward 2, in Parents of Special Needs Adults. My son is like a zombie, and I can't deal with it anymore. There are people, he's going to end up, and he's not the only one. There's other people, we're aging adults that started Parents of Special Needs Adults in 2015, and our grown children are getting worse and worse because there's not enough help and assistance. There's not adequate psychiatric care anywhere, and I just went to a psychiatrist today, but it wasn't him. He doesn't even come in once a month, and all I did was cry. I mean, they didn't do anything and give me more medications. I mean, people need more help. And I don't know what to do with my son because he doesn't even speak with me anymore. And Miss Searcy, you said something about, did he get the $1,000 amount? No, he doesn't know how to do it. He is too disabled. You all don't understand how disabled he is. He's like a zombie. No, he probably needs help more than anybody else, or almost everybody. People with disabilities poor people with disabilities need help more than anybody. And especially in housing and in jobs, and I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned. Why can't he get a job with a regular work schedule? He's yanked around. Yeah, the job is killing him. It really is. Thank you. And why don't you spend 10% of your time helping people like us? Just 10%. And then the rest of the 9% you can spend helping other people. Because my son will not benefit from the new library and the renovations. He will not go to it. He will not benefit. And I get angry when I see all these people making these cute libraries in front of their houses, little libraries, wherever they call them. Why don't you spend that time and money building housing for us, for people like our sons and daughters, instead of building these so-called libraries? They're cute, but what do? They don't help my son. They don't help those most in need. Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Ms.
good
Machui.
evening.
Thank you, Ms. Machui. Do we have any other people that have signed up? Okay, perfect. Excellent. So we're going to move on to council comments. I want to remind colleagues to let's all do our due diligence, to stick to our 3 minutes. And Council Member Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to go through a couple of things. I apologize for speaking quickly. The first is I participated in another lovely Halloween in Tacoma Park, both at the local Halloween party, in which the mayor was so well dressed that I was confused and didn't actually know it was her, and the Halloween festivities of people walking around the neighborhood and meeting their neighbors. It's one of the best parts of where we live because you get to see some of the things that are the values that we express as they go forward. But there's kind of some component issues with regard to that I wanted to get to simultaneously. And those are that anyone who is in Ward 6 knows that to some degree there is some disquiet about traffic, public safety type issues. And that disquiet is being amplified to a large degree on listservs and in other ways. And I've tried to do a diligent job of articulating what those things are. There's also some concern about some things with regards to development in the long-term sort of issues associated with those things. And so Thursday, before all of these wonderful festivities, I participated in the Region Forward meeting for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, which was awesome because I was actually in the inception of that organization in a previous life. And one of the things we talked about was how we were going to move forward with both sustainability and the necessity of increasing public transportation as opposed to reducing it in any significant way. And during that meeting, there was some degree of disconnect between what was being asked or what the other council or what the members of that body were sort of hoping for, and where the communications from presenters or other things were coming from. And it kind of reminded me of being here because, and or the larger world, because I'm sort of a nerd and I do political science and political philosophy. And so hegemony is on my mind. And when you have government, you have continuity of government based on the underpinnings of whatever that government is. And so to me, it seems like what we're dealing with here, both in some of these conversations and where we are now, is a distinction between democratic socialism and democracy. And in democratic socialism, you have people who think that they can tell other people what to do because they know enough to tell them. And in democracy, everybody gets a voice and they say what their opinion is and you kind of shake it out. And so I'd like to say that in the grand scheme of things, as we move through the continuity of governments, that like you should be clear that I believe in democracy and I believe in my voice and I'm going to use it.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, first of all, I want to give thanks and applaud the Public Works staff and their consultant rain plan. Last week, October 26th, there was a online Zoom which walked people through a rain plan stormwater calculator. And I think it's a valuable tool. I mean, it doesn't solve all of our issues by any means, but it is a tool for public to be able to determine ways and costs to improve the stormwater management on their private property. As you know, our stormwater fees right now are almost entirely going for public property, and I applaud the city and Public Works in terms of this effort to expand it and look into what kinds of education, incentives, and might be there for the private property owners. So I would encourage people to go on to our city website and hit stormwater resiliency, and you'll see a rain plan there. It's worth looking at. I also want to remark about tomorrow, I believe roughly 11 o'clock. I agree with one of the speakers today that it's not always easy to find out when these working sessions with the planning board are, but I believe it's tomorrow around 11 a.m., the working session on the minor master plan. And I thank the presenters or the commenters tonight about their diligence and in following and caring about our city and what happens with the minor master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you. So there was no meeting last Wednesday, but as you heard, there was a meeting on the stormwater calculator, which I agree everybody should take a look. That has property that pays stormwater fees, excuse me. And I wanted to thank the city staff for a great Halloween parade, Monster Bash, and a safe evening last night, as far as I know. That's just an awesome set of things. And to mention that I went to the Montgomery County chapter meeting for MML last Thursday, and I was the only one from Tacoma. So if anybody has any questions about the agenda or what transpired, just particularly staff and council, just let me know. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you. I also wanted to first start with a few fun remarks. One is I just really enjoyed Monster Bash and hanging out with several members of the council that were there and all kinds of residents and all the fun costumes. I also enjoyed celebrating one of our local communities, Bruce Baker, his retirement with cheer over the weekend with a lot of our fellow council members and other folks from the area. Cheer has given so much to our particular part of the neighborhood and our entire city. And second, I just wanted to say that last night I really enjoyed the Halloween celebration at Essex House that I was able to join, that Lunch and Learn helped to host. It was really beautiful. All the kids in the building came down, and Jackie Frazier gave them each a bag of candy and books. So I am betting that she would welcome books from the community because she likes to give out free books to all the kids living in the building. And third, next week, Councilmember Fulcher and I will be headed over to Blair High School to do some voter registration in celebration and commemoration or memory of the fact that we are at the 10th and the 30th anniversary of some of our really unique voter laws here in Tacoma Park, and connecting through youth and some of their household adults. So. And then I just want to address some of the comments quickly from residents. One is Mary Jane Machui. I don't know if she's still on, but with the ARPA funding, I it's been really emotional for me going through these last several weeks, looking at our ARPA manager sitting next to me. But I'm just going to take a moment to say I really feel your pain. It's been so hard to try to hand deliver the message and the technical support that people need to get that ARPA funding. And I really appreciate that the city put forward another effort to do an in-person technical assistance. But in the end, I went out to one of the food banks, and very quickly we ended up connecting and creating a Spanish WhatsApp group to try to connect people. And they weren't comfortable reaching out to the city. They wanted someone who spoke Spanish. So we had someone there who so generously, she works for MHP part-time. She gave her own phone number onto this WhatsApp group. We co-drafted a message to people to make them feel welcome, and she got dozens of people reaching out to her, trying to do it. I tried to connect with her to find out just exactly how it went in the end. We haven't been able to reach each other, but it just showed me just how hard it was, and I wanted so badly but didn't have enough bandwidth to literally walk down certain streets and make sure everybody was getting that one-on-one treatment. And so I'll be in that mindset as we talk about ARPA funding today. And then finally, I'm really grateful for the comments about the MMPA and not realizing that those sessions were not up on the website, but I'm sure our city manager will speak to that. I think that's an important thing to be on there. Thank you.
All right. Well, needless to say, I was all over the city, dressed all different types of ways. So, again, want to send my appreciation to our staff for Monster Bash. It was fantastic. It was wonderful weather, ridiculously warm weather, and I had on a full unicorn costume, so I sweat a lot over on Saturday. So it was such a joy to be able to engage with our residents. So that was fun. Also, want to thank again, had a pleasure of being out there and celebrating Bruce. He's been such an instrumental part of our community for so long. And although he's taken on a different path, we still appreciate all of the service that he's provided to Takoma Park. So definitely appreciate being able to share in that. Want to thank the folks, as Councilmember Small mentioned, the New Hampshire Gardens Community Association also had a Halloween block party, so I was able to participate in that. And then this afternoon, I had the pleasure of judging a costume contest along with some fellow judges at the Crossroads Farmers Market. So that was also quite fun to not only see folks in their costumes, but to also be able to grab some great pupusas. So I do want to just remind people about the Crossroads Farmers Market because they're nearing the end of their season. So if you are looking for some great fruits, vegetables, and an amazing lunch, check out Ann Street on Wednesday afternoons. And so with that, I am going to turn things over to our acting city manager, Mr. Eubanks, for city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Good evening, members of the public. I'm first happy to announce that the city has received the GFOA Certificate of Achievement of Excellence in Financial Reporting for our annual comprehensive financial report for the year ending June 30th, 2022. So kudos to the hardworking staff in the finance department and the collaborative effort of all the auditors. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in government accounting and financial reporting. We have been getting these each year in spite of the new GASB regulation updates and GFOA requirements. We are in the final weeks of preparing the FY23 ACFR and are glad to include glad we can include the 2022 award certificate in it to show our commitment to financial excellence. There are two events tomorrow. One of them has already been talked about to some degree, but the first planning board work session, the second planning board work session on the minor master plan, the virtual meeting is from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The MMPA item will be the last on the agenda. The planning board will be holding multiple work sessions on the MMPA during the fall. Staff reports on each session are available on the Planning Board website, as well as the agenda and live stream of the video. The link will be posted in the city manager's comments. I did just check to verify that the September 14th session is on the city's website on the minor master plan webpage, but if there's anything missing, we'll be sure to update it this week and next. The second item that I'd like to talk about from Housing and Community Development is the fact that there will be a Tacoma Arts film screening in the community center tomorrow at 7:30 for Nomad Meets the City. The film tells the story of the Mongolian family who lives, the film tells the story of a Mongolian family who lives, whose lives reveal larger cultural and societal shifts. Filmmaker Suave Club will lead a Q&A with the audience following the screening. HCD also wants to share that the Montgomery County Board of Education will hold a public hearing on November 6th and November 7th at 6 p.m. to hear testimony regarding the superintendent's recommended FY25 capital budget and the FY25 through 2030 capital improvement program. The hearing will be open to the public and held in person. The board will continue to accept pre-recorded audio and video submissions for individuals who wish to remain virtual. All testimonies will be made available to the public on board docs. Individuals who wish to provide public comment will register using the online registration form. The public may begin signing up to provide testimony for both hearings on October 31st at 9 a.m. The link to register will be included in the city manager's comments. Individuals registering may reserve only one space. Sign-up registration will close on the following dates. For the hearing on November 6th, sign-ups close tonight at 12 p.m. And for the hearing on November 7th, sign-ups close on Thursday, November 2nd at 12 p.m. The State Highway Administration's Curl Avenue project is in the final phase, which will be milling and resurfacing of portions of Curl Avenue between the DC line and University Boulevard. The resurfacing work is expected to start November 8th and to be completed in early December. The initial resurfacing work will be done at night between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. This will affect sections of Curl Avenue between the DC line and Westmoreland Avenue, and from Philadelphia Avenue to Lee Avenue. Once those sections are complete, the work will shift to daytime paving, which is expected to start November 20th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. This will affect sections of Carroll Avenue between Lee Avenue and Jefferson Avenue, the former hospital entrance to Flower Avenue, and Long Branch Parkway to University Boulevard. During the work, one lane will remain open to travel. There will be a flagging operation directing traffic through the work zone. Work days are Monday through Friday, but will not include Thanksgiving. During the paving operation, travel through Carroll Avenue is expected to be impacted. Side streets near the work areas may also experience temporary closures. The State Highway Administration has notified the city that the crosswalk markings and stop bars are being replaced over the next several weeks along MD 410. The locations include a section of Philadelphia, including at Chicago Avenue, Tacoma Avenue, and Piney Branch Road, Chestnut Avenue, Holly Avenue, Cedar Avenue, Maple, Holt, and Carroll Avenue. The locations on Carroll Avenue include Grant Avenue, and the locations on Ethan Allen Avenue include Sycamore, Manor Circle, Jackson Avenue, Prince George's Avenue, Elm, and New Hampshire Avenue. And then also from Public Works, just want to acknowledge a few grants that have been received recently, including a $10,000 grant from the PEPCO Sustainable Maryland Program and a $5,000 Maryland DOT Urban Tree Program grant for the establishment of a pollinator arboretum in Stuart Armstrong Gardens. The department also received about $5,000 from MDOT tree grant program for the Tacoma Tree Initiative. So the department wants to acknowledge Anna Misha John, the Vegetation Maintenance Supervisor, as well as Urban Forest Manager, Marty Fry. And finally, I also want to say thank you to city staff, specifically Recreation, Public Works, and the Police Department on a very successful Monster Bash. And thank you for council for serving as judges. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, and so with that, we have adoption of minutes from March the 8th, March the 15th, April the 12th, and April the 24th. Okay, would someone like to move the adoption of the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Gibson, for seconding. Are there any comments or points of discussion regarding the minutes? Excellent. I just want to confirm with the city clerk that we can just do we don't need to do any kind of roll call?
Correct.
Correct. All right. So all those in favor of the adoption of minutes from March the 8th, March the 15th, April the 12th, and April the 24th, please say aye. Aye. Do you have any opposed? Any abstain? Great. Thank you so much. The minutes have been moved. And now we're going to move into our work sessions. Again, just as a reminder for everyone, we are establishing a new process where we are anticipating the amount of time for discussion. And so I am setting my handy dandy timer for 45 minutes, which is going to be the discussion.
I'd like to make a point of order about my appreciation for your point of order.
No problem.
May I comment? Briefly?
Sure.
I just want to say that, yeah, I'm also in favor of keeping it tight. It does, however, mean that, at least for persons like myself that are still learning about what the city does, how it works, et cetera, that some time ahead of time to review and digest the materials is often needed. If I don't have that, then it's not going to be as then the short amount of time might not be as productive as we want. In some cases, following up a work session with discussions is another way of, again, analyzing and digesting the information needed to make a good decision.
Okay, Councilmember Gibson, and for all members of council, just as a reminder, for work sessions, you do have a bye week before there's, if and whether there be a voting item, you do have the opportunity after a work session to follow up with staff and to follow up with your individual council members if you have questions regarding the matters that have been discussed during work sessions. In keeping with the approach, our first work session for tonight is a discussion of reprogramming the direct cash assistance ARPA funds after the program ends. And so I'll turn things over to our acting Deputy City Manager, Mr. Bodek, to walk us through our current state of our direct cash assistance program.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. And I have 8:26, Mayor, just a heads up. All right. So tonight we'll be talking about the Direct Cash Assistance Program. I was last before you back in July, mid-July, and the decision at the time was that we would keep the program open until the end of October, and then at that time come back to you with updated accounting numbers and talk about what next steps might be for the program. Just as an opening, and you'll see this a little bit later on, in our last 2 weeks of having it open, we had 150 applicants, which is by far the highest we've had in over 6 months. And when we were talking with our consultants earlier today, they said that this is something that they will probably use in future programs like this, just seeing the impact that sort of having a deadline has had and sort of bringing additional folks out of the woodwork. And so tonight, talking about the quick agenda, I want to go back, and this will be a review, talking about the spending plan history, as well as some of the updates that occur as part of the FY24 budget and some of the conversations we've had back in July. An accounting update, there's a couple of points I want to make. Yesterday, I submitted our Q1 FY24 expenditure report to the U.S. Treasury. They call it Q3 for tax year, but that's just been submitted, so those numbers are fresh. Talk a little bit about the program itself, its history, our contract with our provider. I've mentioned during city manager comments a month or so ago that we conducted a survey. We had over 130 responses, which was about 10% of individuals that received a small grant. Talk about options and staff recommendation, and then follow up with questions. The first two slides are a bit intensive in terms of content, so feel free to stop me if there are any questions early on. So again, I'll go through this quickly because it should be reviewed, but if you have questions, feel free to stop me. The initial tranche we received back in 2021. We received the second in 2022 for a total of 17.5 rounding up, $1 million in ARPA funding. In the initial round, the Treasury guidance was that you could use ARPA dollars to cover lost revenue that municipalities incurred as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's programs that weren't, rec programs, for example, you weren't able to generate those incomes, but still had staff, or many other reasons why there might be revenue loss. The city at that time did an initial calculation of what it was for FY21 and came up with this number of $1.19 million, which was used at the time to support gaps in the general fund. That was, the Treasury rule was later changed more recently, so that municipalities have the option to not calculate their total amount of revenue loss. Well, they can either calculate their total amount of revenue loss, or they can make a standard allocation or a standard amount of $10 million that we report as revenue loss. That means that $10 million of the city's ARPA funding can be used for any government purpose. The other $7 million have to be used for specific purposes identified under the Treasury rule. The next decision was made for FY 2022 in budget, and then there was an extensive process that occurred following that reprogrammed the remainder of ARPA funds and developed 23 new programs and initiatives. The Direct Cash Assistance Program was one of those at that time, the city allocating $2.3 million. That went in tandem as sort of a three-step social services spending plan with social services spending generally, grants, this Direct Cash Assistance Program, and community connectors. Since then, there were some reallocations between fiscal years, including in FY 2024. Council, during the FY 24 budget process, amended the 5-year spending plan, the ARPA spending plan, and reallocated almost $1.3 million. You'll see a lot of that went to city CIP projects, as well as a few others that are identified here. So back to that Treasury rule and the $10 million standard allowance. In my first presentation to you all a while ago now, time flies, but I mentioned sort of this question or concern of we just have to make sure that we're splitting this between the $10 million standard allowance and the $7.5 million that we need to be spending on specific programs identified in Treasury Code. As you can see through FY24 Q1, we haven't spent a lot of it yet. We've spent $4.8 million on these sort of non-revenue replacement dollars. Those are the ones that's, again, specifically identified in Treasury Code for use of ARPA dollars. And 1.7 has been the capital projects. That's part of that $10 million amount. And if you look over on the right, that's a list of if all those dollars were spent for those purposes, and there's a combination of some like premium pay for essential workers, that's already an amount that's been paid. Those are amounts that fall into that at least $7.4 million. And I do want to highlight the community connectors here, because in your packets you will have also seen the updated FY24, the 5-year spending plan. And I just want to remind you all that in July, we did decide, or it was council's desire to move that program forward by hiring an FTE to help develop a program, a limited in time FTE. That will be reflected for codification purposes in the next, because it followed both the conclusion of the budget and the first budget amendment that'll be included and codified in the second budget amendment. But I just want to make sure it shows a zero, that is, we are anticipating that will be spent, and it'll be adjusted, at least for the year, based on the FTE, prorated FTE at date of hire. And I just want to say it's very important that assuming all of these dollars are spent for the purposes that they're currently programmed, the remainder of these dollars, and I don't see a reason why most of them either haven't already or shouldn't be, that the margin is becoming quite small. We're looking at about $142,000 of wiggle room at the moment. And that's with a very, very big caveat that if we assume that the direct cash assistance final number will be $1.5 million, and that's shy of the $2.3 million. If the remainder of that is reprogrammed, that's what the dollar amount would be. And I just want to make sure that's clear before I move on.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. Yeah. So so you'll see kind of in the middle of the table, direct cash assistance. The assumption that went into $7.6 million number is that direct cash assistance will have been spent for that purpose at $1.5 million, and it does not assume that the full $2.3 has been spent. So again, this direct cash assistance program was part of this sort of three-pronged social service approach as part of a way to implement a program like this, because this is something the city had never done before. The city entered into a one-year contract back in September of 2022 with a fee schedule, and I thought it was important for discussion tonight to understand a little bit what that fee schedule was. It's a not-to-exceed amount. And I did get confirmation from the vendor today that they understand that to mean that they receive a fee for every amount that's dispersed of about 6.5%. So we are invoiced both for the amount that they disperse, a very round number. So if we have 20 grants that we're dispersing, it's $20,000 plus 6.5% of that. That's the admin fee that's going to the vendor. And just highlight it now in case I forget to later on. If sort of the desire is to redistribute the funds at this point, the remainder of the funds, our vendors' understanding is that fee would still apply to that amount. And I just want to make sure that's clear. Theoretically, we could push back on that, have a discussion with them about that. It's not the same amount of work that they're doing at that point, but that's their current understanding.
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So that 6.5% fee is applicable to the total amount that we had anticipated awarding, or the actual amount that was awarded?
That will be tied with the actual amount that's awarded.
Okay.
Yeah. The program launched in October, so it's been almost exactly a year. And as of 10/30/23, we've had 2,500 applications submitted, And I think the updated number today is 1411 approved. This was as of yesterday. And they're continuing to approve them right now and go through them right now. As I said, it's been 150 applications. They're still processing those. They'll probably continue to be processing those for the next few weeks, and that's when we'll have the final number. If all of those numbers, if all of those applications are approved, that's obviously a pretty significant amount. That number will go up and reduce the amount to be reallocated. But what we've been seeing, I have the specific for this 150 applications, is that we continue to have difficulties with folks who are applying that live outside the borders of Tacoma Park. I did not realize this until going through this program, but I think many of you, all of you, are probably aware that your post office box can say Tacoma Park and you don't live within the city's limits. It's incredibly difficult to explain that, on a regular basis. Where, why am I not received money or been denied this application? So that ends up becoming a fairly high percentage of those that are rejected. We had, as we continued to have throughout the process, we had 4 potentially fraudulent applications that were flagged for fraud, and 23 duplicate applications, which is something we also saw a lot of in the last few months, which is folks that thought that this was another round. We did our best to message out that this is only for new applicants, but there was still confusion as we went through. A comment about outreach, because I know this has been something that's been talked a lot about, and it's something certainly at the staff level we wrestled with a lot, and trying to understand what the best ways to message this program out to the community, provide support, provide language support. We worked with our vendor to develop those outreach materials. It was a very cross-departmental effort. The IT staff, communication staff, recreation staff was trained at the front desk to be able to do intake. We do have language specialists on staff, or folks that understand Spanish and Amharic, who could support folks. The library was all trained. We saw a number of applicants through the library. HCD staff was trained, and folks in the clerk's office as well, so that whenever someone came in and asked for an application, no matter where they were, there would be someone in City Hall that could be able to help them. We also reached out to our partners with landlord networks, third-party organizations, the school district, community nonprofits, to distribute our translated materials, and just to generally increase awareness and try and just spread this to as many forums as possible. In-person events, which I'll talk about in the next slide, our newsletter, and then this applicant survey, which I talked about before, which was done in 2 parts, one to get a good sense of the program, but also as a way to sort of help prompt in this last phase some of the word-of-mouth conversations.
Councilmember Small, did you have a question on that slide?
Yeah, kind of. And I hear to some degree two things. I hear a commitment from the staff to get the word out, and I hear you arcing against either willingness or availability of applicants. And then on the previous slide, you were sort of talking about making it to the acceptable number. And I just wanted to know if you could just talk to some degree about your concern about where we are, and or if the appetite is available within the community for making it to the proposed number.
I just want to
Does that make
say
sense?
maybe that makes sense, but I think maybe towards the end of the discussion, when you kind of walk through some of the potential options, that may be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So in-person events, I think, Council, you've been apprised of these as they have occurred. And we had some wonderful volunteers who came out to assist us in some of the tabling tabling events and some of the on-site events that occurred. We received, especially early on, a huge spike in applications whenever we held an in-person event, with sort of a diminishing margin of return as the program moved on. This is I sort of talked about this already, but this was the dashboard that we've had up for I'm not sure quite how long, but at least 6 to 8 months since I've been with the city. That sort of had an rolling accounting of where we stood and how many total households have been served, what the application status was, et cetera. This is something we asked our vendor to put together. I shared a similar slide back in July, but just where we're getting, where the grantees are from throughout the city. We saw from July until now, in wards 1 and 2, we saw approximately 10 additional grantees. In 3 and 4 and 6, about 20. And in Ward 5, which we had felt was lower, we saw our highest uptick of about 40. And I'm just going to go through this community survey that we put out for all grantees. Again, 132 responses. The general demographics more or less are reflective of the demographic data that we collected in the application process, with the exception of we had more respondents female and more respondents who are over 65 plus. One second. Oh, and we did, I just thought this was interesting. We did ask a question, in which ward do you live, for purposes of the survey. And I think a lesson learned, we had each ward, we did not have a map connected to it, tied with it. So more than, I think it was 90% said that they didn't know in which ward they live. Something that we will not, a mistake we will not make with Balancing Act when we roll that out. I thought this was an interesting response. Where did folks learn about the City of Tacoma Park Direct Cash Assistance? More or less, a spread across the different mediums that we put forward, word of mouth, of course, being the number one. We were really curious about how folks utilized their cash assistance, and it went to things like food and groceries, housing payments, utility bills, debt repayment, health care, education, other. Folks talked about buying an e-bike or to pay the tags on their cars for that for that year. Some other folks talked about buying they needed an upgraded laptop or a smart book, and this question is, has this assistance helped alleviate any financial stress or burden caused by the pandemic? And had sort of an overwhelming response of folks that said yes to that question. Although, to frame that question a little bit more, if we talk about long-term impacts, we wanted to get a bit of a sense of, have you been able to save any portion of the cash assistance for future use or emergencies? Overwhelming response was no. Do you feel more empowered to face economic challenges after receiving the cash assistance? Overwhelming response was yes. And then this other question, have you experienced any lasting positive impacts on your life as a result of the cash assistance? And I think it's really encouraging that there were at least 65 that said yes. And back to some of the reasons why having this injection of one-time money, $1,000, folks that are under that incredible economic burden and stress could say, okay, there's this debt I need to pay off. Someone said I had a flat tire and I had no other way to pay for it, and now I could drive to and from my job. Someone said I've it improved my personal well-being and enrichment. I took a ceramics class with this. And then just the comment that this reduced financial stress and it felt like I was getting support from the community. This first question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with the direct cash assistance program? I think it's a little bit of a softball. I think it's easy to say that, $1,000 is great, but the numbers I think really show that. Overwhelming respondents said 10. And then a question that's helpful for us and for the vendor, how satisfied were you with the overall support, communication and support provided throughout the program? Again, overwhelming number of respondents replied at 10. All right, so getting to the next steps and staff recommendations. So assuming once we get through a final processing and accounting balance of the $2.3 million being around $700,000. There are a few options, and I think I've talked with you before about the possibility of redistribution. If council were to redistribute the balance of funds, that $700,000, to any prior approved grantees or a subset of those, I lay out sort of what those dollar values would be. And those are actually a little bit high based on our updated data. They'll probably be about 100 or so on average below that. And there are many different ways to do it. One way to do it would be to do it to everyone. You could also, because income reporting is part of that, you could have different thresholds. And if council was to move forward with that option, we would recommend that we come back with some of those different options fleshed out. Once we have the very final accounting, so we know exactly what those numbers would be, and I think it would require a formal council action at that time as well, either through a resolution or otherwise. Option 2 would be to reopen. So we do have the balance is $700,000. There could be an additional 700 applicants that come forward. And the only way I can immediately think of fairly managing that would be first come, first serve. And based on the numbers we had the first time and the popularity of the program, I don't doubt that we would probably hit that number relatively quickly. And then the final option is option 3. And I'm just going to move to quickly just to highlight this spreadsheet that is probably hard to read, sort of blown up with this, a lot of numbers. But I just want to focus on column FY24 adopted budget. And if you look at that column, there's a significant amount of ARPA funds that are anticipated to be spent this year. If you look at FY25, there is $6.6 million less of ARPA funds that are planned to be spent that year. And what that means in part, number one, those CIP items, those sort of checks will come due potentially in the next budget cycle. That may be a hole that we need to fill in some way. And any of those other sort of one-time expenses that were put in FY24, or I'm sorry, not one-time expenses, but any expenses that are ongoing costs of the city would need to be raised in some other manner in FY25. But some of those social service programs that do not have grant funding or funding that ends after FY24, those are programs like our emergency rental assistance, which we've put forward about $250,000 to each year. Recreation scholarships, prior to ARPA, we offered recreation scholarships up to a certain income amount or a certain reduction. These recreation scholarships have been for 100% of tuition costs, and those would go away. Multifamily housing rehab grants, and the city's quality of life grants. There is no current funding in FY25 for those programs. And then other FY25 and beyond budget priorities that might come up as council is continuing to work towards its analyzing its own budget priorities for next year. And as staff, we work to continue the forecasting efforts that we're doing in terms of what FY25 is going to look like. FY25 is going to be a very hard budget year. And I will leave it at that as more, and we'll have that conversation later in the month. So there's always also the possibility you can sort of table some of this question till after some of those conversations as well. But I would say the staff recommendation, if you ask staff who were having conversations with individuals coming in to submit applications and seeing a section of the population that they don't always see in building, or especially office staff and communicating with residents, the overwhelming thought, people really need money, really need support in some way from the city. And I think those staff would be very happy with this. Give them as much as we can. Sitting, however, in this seat and the seat I've sat in over the last month or so, again, it's a really challenging budget circumstance that we face, and a significant social services spending cliff that we're running into for next year. And so our recommendation would be some version of option 3. So, thank you.
Okay, go back to it now, Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Small.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And I didn't mean to presage or interrupt your point, Andrew, but I did want to say, I guess, a couple of things about the repurposing and being a legislator. Somebody has to be the uncomfortable ogre in the process of stewardship of fiduciary responsibilities. And some people do have to be the high-touch people that interact with people on a daily basis, and I know that is difficult. I think my argument here would be that if, like, to presage to go back to what I had said earlier, that I do think that there's some broader policy things here about being near a UBI type model, but not actually doing it. That could be potentially alienating in the process as well, as far as expanding. I think if you look at a couple of the different areas on who is applying, there may be some cultural sensitivities about the way different kinds of groups interact that could be affected here. And I just wanted to make sure that I spoke out for the fact that to some degree it's got to be okay for us to look at a budget that is big and find places to make sure that it is smaller, I guess. And if we got money, we should use it. Thank you.
Councilmember Small, thank you. So this has always been one of the biggest challenges for us when it comes to the direct cash assistance, and then trying to manage the next phase, right? Can you go back to the slide where you show what people use the money on? Right. And to see things like utility bills and housing payments, our emergency, there's some things we're not talking about, but like there were some of our programs that won't be funded in 25 that we didn't have to work so hard to get rid of the money. It was gone like that. Yeah. And that was our emergency rental assistance, the multifamily rehab, and I do believe our rec scholarships went quick too. They went like that. We didn't have to have a bunch of meetings. We didn't have to have a lot of table sittings. We didn't have to have the money went quickly. And so where I'm leaning now is towards managing, I like to say, bringing the plane in for a landing, right? Because what will ultimately happen is, and what everyone is seeing, You know, you go to MML, you go to all these different places, you hear about what municipalities are struggling with, what counties are struggling with. Now, everybody's struggling with managing that plane coming in for landing, because people expect to still be able to come to you for that level of resource, and they may not be able to understand that the money has dried up, right? So they're still going to be demanding certain assistance, right? And so when we go back to your options and looking at that outline budget, for me, I'm thinking we're at a point now where I feel like we've done our due diligence with direct cash, and now I see this money as a way for us to plug a hole for the next fiscal year for things like the emergency rental assistance, the rec scholarships, those kinds of things. Because otherwise, once we give this money out, there's very little to nothing left, right, for next year. And so I do think that it may be, and again, maybe I'm one of those bureaucratic ogres that are kind of anticipating human behavior, which is once this money is gone, people are not going to understand when they call us, hey, I need some help with my rent. They're not going to be able to understand we no longer have money in the budget for this. So how do we figure out the right way to balance that? And again, I'm more inclined to taper it off a little bit versus having this sharp cliff where we go from a whole lot to nothing over the course of a year. Can we look at that last slide again, where we see the actual 25? Yeah, there's nothing there. So unless we choose to not spend some of these ARPA dollars in 24, but this is what the budget is, right? We're gonna go from a lot of programming to very little. And so that is a concern that I have in terms of tapering back the support, which is why I'm leaning more towards trying to reallocate those dollars so that we can have some sort of service support that we know people were likely using the money for anyway in FY25. But I'll defer, allow council members to speak. Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually, in spite of the things that I've said, I think looking at how the money has gone out and what it's gone towards, and thinking about who benefits as we move forward with these different options and what else they're benefiting from in the city, I would encourage us to consider option 3. And that's partially based on specifically what I'm seeing in maybe the poorest ward of our city. I know I say that a lot, I'm sorry. But there is a high concentration of folks that got touched. You can see it from the map. You can see it some from the numbers. I wish it were even higher, based on what I know about the socioeconomics. But emergency rental assistance, I think, can get out to a lot of those same people and cover that one of those largest categories that we see there. I'm also aware that we have a weekly food distribution going on with fresh foods in 2 different parts. Actually, one is weekly, one is monthly. And the lines are out the door. They're so long, and the food is fantastic. Now, I don't want those folks to be so burdened. I don't know how much of their cash is coming from the city that we then, assume that all those people are taken care of, and that largest food chunk goes away. We do not want food insecurity in our community. But maybe part of the consideration of this is grants that are going to those entities that are doing some of that food distribution and seeing how much is going out to them. My biggest concern, though, I think rec scholarships are really, really important. But again, I just want to emphasize there is a disconnect in Ward 5 about who's getting services and information. And it's not only language, it's because I was told very early on, a year ago, that part of the problem is that in 20912, You know, a lot of our kids are going to other rec services in the county. They're going out. They're the ones that are confused about that 20912. I think we're the main ones that are confused across Flower. I can't tell you how many people called me personally, and I had to say, you're on this side of Flower, you're on that side of Flower. And we talked about it for each one, 20, 30 minutes sometimes, because people aren't map savvy. So, but that isn't a reason, right, to not serve that population and to solve that problem, and somehow that we still collectively, I say we still haven't solved that problem. Where do we situate somebody to make sure that people know they can get scholarships and to where they're going? They got so confused every time I tried to tell them where to go. To go to the library, they'd go to the wrong library. To go to the school, they'd go to the wrong school. So I guess I challenge the city, if we decide to put it into that option 3, please, will you work with me? I'm appealing to you. Please work with me to try to find some out-of-the-box ideas about how we can do a better job of not me personally having to walk door to door to do that kind of stuff, because it's not sustainable for me. Thank you.
City Clerk?
Mayor, I didn't know if you wanted a reminder about time. So
Yes.
there's
We are
about
at 8 minutes.
Yes, we are.
We are. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I will take less than 8 minutes. First, Mr. Bullock, I want to thank you so much. I remember months ago when you came here saying it's time to shut down the program, and you were so readily willing to reconsider and keep it open until the later date. And I'm pleased to see that there were quite a few residents who were able to take advantage of that opportunity. I think, though, as I've listened to your presentation and listened to Mayor Searcy, I would agree with the mayor that we're looking for a different kind of a parachute now, and so I would support her suggestion that we try to anticipate kind of a slower decline in resources especially for rental assistance and food programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, to make a long story short, I think option 3 makes sense. I think we gave this a very good try. I think we got very good results, and thank you for the presentation. I loved the survey and the survey results. That was a little bonus prize there. I think it's time to look at some of the zeros for next year, specifically related to assisting residents and not some of the other categories, and try to fill them out. And to that end, some of us were talking earlier today about a couple of other programs. For example, a grant program that is zeroed out for next year. Just looking at what that money has done, similar to, not as in-depth as direct cash assistance numbers, but some sense of what these programs have produced so far, so we have some idea of what to put forward for 25.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala? Councilmember Fulcher?
Yes. In looking at option 3 and looking at some of the programs that we supported with ARPA money, if it's possible to have some of the similar statistics about the breakdown of who money went to, it might be helpful for us when we're deciding on what to do with those next dollars, what programs might affect the groups that we're trying to help the most.
And with 5 minutes, sorry, Councilmember Gibson.
Yeah, just to say, I also support the direction. It sounds like that most of my colleagues are going to looking at option 3. I have to admit that I'm still learning about what these other programs do, and it's where is the greatest need? Where is the money leveraged in a way? Are there other county, state, federal programs that in some cases could fill the gaps and that maybe we wouldn't have to? I mean, those are some of the questions that I would need to learn more about to actually suggest which of these programs we would reallocate them to, but certainly that makes sense, especially in light of our budget situation upcoming.
I guess kind of piggybacking off of Councilmember Gibson's point and Councilmember Honzak's point around food insecurity. If I remember correctly, one of the things that we were hoping to have come out of the direct cash assistance was also to be able to provide participants with a little bit of a readout in terms of their eligibility for other programs. So like SNAP, other kinds of county types of programs. And so the idea was that they would be at least receive some information regarding their eligibility. I think one of the things that we've seen time and time again is we have a lot of nonprofits that are offering food, and we did offer some grants, the food insecurity, which I would be interested in hearing the readout for that. And one of the goals that they were supposed to do was to try to encourage more folks to get SNAP benefits. And I think that that's been one of the main challenges that we may have people who, for whatever reason, maybe it's around a very valid concern about their immigration status and their eligibility for these other programs, which is very valid. But, how we can start to try to make sure that that our programs are trying to deal with that referral loop to the social services that are managed by the county. So I know that that was one of the goals of a couple of our programs. This one, to provide them with information around their eligibility for those other social service programs, and also the food insecurity grants, which were designed to really try to not only provide people with food, but also try to help and educate folks around the SNAP program. So that is something that I do think, as we're thinking through some of the lessons learned from our various ARPA programs, that may be something worth helping us to understand. And who knows, maybe we can provide some insight to the county around ways in which they may want to consider improving their outreach for immigrant populations and others to encourage them to want to seek out those resources. Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, just very quickly. Enter the Community Connector program as one of the pieces that we were looking at. Also, I note that the food security program for fiscal '25 does have dollars in it, which is great.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. That helpful discussion, and I hear you. I mean, there's a reason. I could have sorted this differently, or sorted the cells differently, but had I had the FY24 numbers on the bottom, it would have looked a heck of a lot like an actual cliff. But I think that's something that, since I started, has been a real challenge. And hopefully we'll bring that to you as part of the FY25, or we'll bring that to you as part of the FY25 discussion. Is there a way, if there's a long-term interest in continuing these programs, for example, rec scholarships, is there a way to leverage ARPA dollars to build tax capacity? So it's not necessarily just a phase out. It may just be a phase out of the type of funding that we're using to support it. So,
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank my colleagues because we are completing this discussion with 37 seconds to spare.
I would like to thank the mayor for coming up with this plan.
I cannot take full credit for it.
But
it was
you're
a
the mayor, so you're allowed to.
Okay, well, thank you, but it was a group effort.
Yeah, but you forced it.
It was a group effort. All right, so our next agenda item and our last agenda item for this evening is the quarterly financial report for the first quarter. And that discussion is a 30-minute. And with that, Mr. Eubanks, are you doing that one? Excellent.
Okay. Good evening again. This evening, we'll be talking about the fiscal year '24 financial report for Q1. To begin, I just want to, as I've summarized before, talk about the purpose and some of the limitations of the financial report. First of all, this financial report covers the July 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2023. And the purpose of these financial reports is primarily to summarize the revenue and expenditure for that time period. Please note, though, that it does include, in addition to the adopted budget, budget amendments. So this obviously will include the first budget amendment for this year. Another purpose is to identify discrepancies in the year-to-year trends, and then finally to enable inquiry into an investigation into any inconsistencies, in this case between the same time period for FY22 and now. Some of the limitations, it is retrospective, and so here we are in November looking at a portion of the city's fiscal year that was some time ago. The limitation is, another limitation is the fact that the data is really influenced by a number of practices by external parties, including the county, who we receive quite a few of our revenue sources from, as well as some of the infrequent or hard to predict sources of revenue that come from residents in the form of fees or applications or licenses, as well as penalties. This is not an audit. We will have a conversation about the audit this month, but this is not that, and so it's an imperfect casting tool, right? So it gives us an idea of what to expect this year in a broad sense, but it is not by any means a science, much more not. So before we get into the financial report itself, I'd like to do just a recap of the adopted budget. So the approved budget totals about $4.4 million. 71% of that $4.4 million is general fund, which represents about $31.2 million. All other sources are from the city's other funds, which include the Stormwater Management Fund, Special Revenue Fund, Speed Camera Fund, as well as the ARPA Fund. The ARPA Fund for this year is $7.9 million. And then below that chart, you'll see illustration of that breakdown. And obviously, the large portion of the city's funding is managed within the general fund, which is all of our day-to-day operations. Another way of looking at this is by expenditure type. And just an important thing to note is that the majority of the city's expenses are applied to personnel, followed by services and charges, and then our CIP program. Here, the important thing to note when reviewing a comparison of our revenues to our expenditures is the fact that at face value, we're looking at something close to a $10 million budget if you are viewing the entire budget. The general fund itself has a technical deficit of $2.2 million, but that is in a lot of ways an intentional deficit, right? Because we have things like our ERR, in which we plan in advance for large capital purchases. And so when you see at the bottom of this presentation, use of reserves, those use of reserves are purpose for things like large equipment purchases, facility improvements, housing reserve fund uses, and then also bond reserve for the library. And the same is true if you were to change your lens from just looking at the general fund but to the entire fund. You'll see that the majority of that deficit, quote unquote, is coming from our reserves, and then a similar amount from our bond reserve for general fund compared to our total fund. All right, and then I also just want to talk very briefly about the budget amendment, because the Q1 financials do include the budget amendment. The total impact to the budget from the first budget amendment is an increase of $4.3 million. However, there's a very important caveat. Only $124,000 of that $4.3 million is an increase to the budget itself. Everything else is a reallocation from FY23 to FY24. So the majority of that is not new funding, it's just replaced funding or reallocated funding. For projects like capital projects that are ongoing that were expected to finish in FY23 but didn't, grants in progress, as for instance, we have several sustainability grants that where residents haven't quite finished the project and so have not utilized the grants, and so we, recognizing that money is actually in use, have transferred those dollars over to this fiscal year. And then, as I think we all have talked about in many instances, in large part due to supply chain issues that still result from the pandemic, we're still seeing some equipment delays. And so, again, we expected to purchase some things in FY23, and those purchases haven't been realized, and so those monies have been reallocated to FY24. So finally, the quarterly financial report. And I think as expected, the quarterly financial report is on par with what we've seen in at least the past quarter from FY22. To date, revenues are at about 23% and expenditures are at about 14%. On the revenue side, there is I think at face value, an interesting difference. At this point last year, there was, the city had collected almost 41% of its entire budget, but that was due to something that we won't see again, which was the impact of ARPA. So at this time last year, we received $8.7 million, which was basically the final tranche of ARPA dollars that we expect to receive. For FY24 is a very, very small portion that was budgeted to be due, and that's just over $1,000. On the expenditure side, we're on par with what we expect to see and on par with FY22. So we've collected so far $7.2 million, which is about 14% of our budgeted expenditures. And if you compare that to FY23, it was $6.7 million last year, and then that was 12% of the budgeted amount. Excess revenue over expenditure for FY24 is roughly $654,000, and this is solely in a result of unspent general fund dollars. And then just a few highlights for our general fund specifically. Important to note that when we review and compare the year-to-year numbers, we're looking for significant differences, and we've defined significant differences as 20%. And so the general fund revenues total $7.5 million, or approximately 26% of the FY24 budget. That is not a significant difference when compared to FY23, where we saw $7.2 million collected, or 27%. The same is true for expenditures in the general fund. For FY24, we've expensed $6.4 million from the general fund, or 18%. Compare that to FY23, and it's $5.6 million and 15%. So again, not a significant difference. There are, if you pay close attention to some of the rows in the financial report, again, at face value, there are some things that stand out, but The one I think that stands out most is penalties and interest. That is one of those categories that is incredibly hard to predict. We really have no idea. It's a best guess of how many fees for any particular essentially error we're going to collect. And so this time last year, we had budgeted, I think it was only $45,000, and had received by this time last year over 100% of that. We're very different this year, where we've only budgeted about I think it's 75,000, so a little bit more than last year, but we've only received about 13% of that. The use of money in property that increase is solely due to the change in interest rates that we've seen over the last couple of years. So this is money that just happens to sit in an account and earn interest, and as a result of higher interest rates, we happen to benefit from that. So that is the difference there. And on the tree fund, again, this year we've collected 100%. You compare that to last year where we collected 0%. That is really an internal management change, where this year we've transferred the money from our unearned revenue much earlier than we did last year. And that's the only reason why you see a difference there. And typically in our presentations of the quarterly financial, we mostly focus on the general fund, but there are just a few things that I'd like to highlight here. On the speed camera fund, as you all know, for the last 2 years, we've been expecting income from our red light camera program. We hoped that we would realize those funds last year. We did not. That actually resulted in a deficit. This year, we're working very hard with one of our vendors to make sure that those red light camera funds are actually received. And we have just recently received good news that SHA has approved the city's design of the cameras. And so the next step is that approval has to happen at the district level. But if all things go as expected, we hope to have the cameras installed and the program up and running in the next 3 or 4 months. And that money is a significant amount of money from that program. So we're talking $1.3 million that is, again, new money to the city, and is a little bit more flexible than the money that's in that fund now, which is only purposed for public safety. Now, we've included some things out of the general fund in recent years, like sidewalks, and I think we've made it work, but the red light camera money will give us a lot more flexibility to do some other things. So really excited about that program making some headway. And then in the stormwater fund, this again is really just administrative. As a part of the budget amendment that was approved by council, there was a transfer of existing programs from FY23 to FY24 that totaled $321,000. Because that portion of the budget amendment wasn't realized in the financial system that we used when we did the report, that didn't transfer. And so the report doesn't reflect the fact that it doesn't reflect the budget amendment. But again, those are dollars that were unspent in last year that were simply transferred to this year. So it's not new program. It's not a new expense. It's just a transferred expense. But I do want to mention that. So in conclusion, our financial report basically suggests that our revenues and expenses are consistent with both expectations and with past years, and that the financing gaps, if you will, otherwise known as deficits, between the revenue and expenditure are in line with what we expected based on the adopted budget. And so next steps for financial information coming from city staff and some of our vendors. November 15th, we have a presentation of the ACFR, which is a comprehensive financial report. And so you'll get a very good idea of where we ended, the best idea you could possibly get on where we ended the last fiscal year. It'll also give us a very good idea of where we are with our reserves, and it's a great item to have as we begin to have conversations about fiscal year 25. Also on November 15th will be the final report of the city's long-term financial forecast You might recall several months ago, we had one of our vendors come in and give a presentation on the 10-year trajectory of the city based on some, I think at the time, estimates and best assumptions about where the city's tax rate would be. The long-term financial forecast is coming before you on November 15th, actually includes the current tax rate. So a little bit more informative. So looking forward to that conversation as well. If you'd like to get kind of an advance understanding of that, that long-term financial report is included in the adopted budget at the back in the appendix, I believe. So please take a look at that. And then we'll also be presenting the actuary evaluation for the police pension plan, which again, as Andrew
David, is he
suggested.
coming? The guy who's involved.
Councilmember Small, if you can please wait until you're acknowledged.
Oh, my bad.
Thanks so much.
You had a question?
Apologies. I just wanted to know if the since the police actuarial person is different than the other stuff, if he was going to be in attendance on the 15th.
Yeah, he will.
All right, thank you.
Yep, I can't give that report. Neither can Andrew. And then on the 20th, we have the presentation of the budget forecast, and then you all will be having a work session on the budget priorities. And I will stop there for any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Hanzak?
Thank you so much. This was an excellent presentation, as always. I just had one question, actually, and it might be you and our not sure what to call you anymore. I'm still used to calling you by a different name. But with regard to ARPA, I'm looking at the handouts that were given versus your slides. I'm sorry, I can't tell you which slide number it is, but on page 8, where it shows the expenditure by fund for the ARPA funds. And I'm just thinking about the burn rate for our ARPA funds. I just mentioned it over here on the side. Are either one of you at all concerned about the burn rate of only 5% at this point in the quarter? I mean, I can think of a million reasons why that's true, but I know we're also really eager to make sure that we can really get the money out the door. And I just wondering how you're feeling about that, because 5% at this stage isn't surprising, but then again, it's not very promising. Yeah. So I know how hard it is to spend these dollars. Thanks.
Yeah, so there's a few different reasons. I'd say all of our, outside of direct cash assistance, all of our grant funds are on target. So the emergency rental assistance and those types of programs that aren't on target are things like the mental health counselors, that we were hoping that there'd be a significant amount of that expended by now. The good thing about that is I think no matter what, we'll be underway, well before our deadline at the end of next year, and those will be considered allocated at that point. So there should not be any issue with that particular program moving forward. Another one that stands out is the library project. I believe there's $3.5 million in FY24 for that expenditure, and that has not been touched at all. Part of the reason is we are initially spending down the bond proceeds with our initial spending. Part of that is because of a term I learned recently, arbitrage rebate liability. And so we're sort of tapping that account first prior to touching the ARPA dollars. So that is something that may be pushed into the FY25 depending on what the numbers look like, but that's a significant percentage we're talking about. So.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you very much. This was very clear and very helpful. Question about the speed camera fund. Is there anything that council or mayor, not to volunteer you, could be doing to see that the SHA district office moves as quickly as possible?
It's a good question, council member, and I would have to defer to the chief of police, and I'll ask him and get back to council.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think that, from if you were to ask chief, the biggest hurdle's been overcome. which was
Right,
the
which is
initial
the
approval
initial
from
approval, yeah,
SHA.
yeah. But we don't
And
wanna
so my
spend it.
understanding is the couple of next steps are more pro forma than anything else.
Let's check.
Yeah, but we'll check.
Great, thank you very much. That's it.
Awesome. Well, I do want to thank you all for working on this report. I always say it is very hard for me to draw many conclusions from the first quarter report. But it's good to have, and it is good for us to have an ability to kind of keep track of these in this way. But I am really looking forward to the ACFR, and hopefully we'll get hard copies in our mailboxes soon. But I do appreciate staff working on this report because it's really helpful to put into perspective, especially when we're talking about the ACFR. And seeing no more lights, I think we are done with this session, a whopping 9 minutes and 11 seconds early. And that is our last agenda item for this evening. So I would like to make that motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilmember Smalls,
Second.
motion. Councilmember Gibson, second. All right, thank you. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.